Okay, hello and welcome to episode number 3. I can't believe it's number 3 already. Episode number 3 of the Sit Rep podcast. My name's Ryan Condon, and I just want to say thank you for choosing to listen to my new podcast. As I've mentioned already, this is episode number 3, so hopefully you would have listened to episodes 1 and 2 already. If you haven't, then feel free to listen to them after you've listened to this one. There is no particular order, but it does make continuity a little bit easier if you go from 1 to 3 in that order. However, if you have listened to it, thank you very much for supporting me and my channel. I very much appreciate it, and you're more than welcome here on the podcast. So what's in today's episode? Well, today's episode, I'm going to talk mostly about Race to the Stones. So I'm going to come on to that shortly. However, I'm going to start by talking about a 55k ultramarathon I ran 2 days ago. So I'm recording this episode 2 days after I completed the London 55k ultra. I think it's been rebranded now. So this year is the last year the organisers have called themselves London Ultra, and it's been rebranded to Beyond London as part of their major rebrand, which is Beyond Trails. I'm not going to go into graphic detail about that because, well, for 2 reasons. Firstly, because it's not that interesting, and secondly, I'm not sponsored at all by the organisers, so I have no interest in pushing their new brand change. However, I thought I'd mention it as it's a really good event. It's also an event which is a bit of a hidden secret. It's a bit of an unknown gem of ultra running in London. When you think of ultra running, you think of running over Snowdonia, you think of running through the Peak District, you think of running across the Jurassic Coast in the south. However, you don't think of running through central London, and that's exactly what I did 2 days ago. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the London 55k ultra, and then I'm going to move on to Race to the Stones. The reason why I want to talk about Race to the Stones is because I am returning to Race to the Stones in 3 weeks. So in just under 3 weeks now, I'm going to be trying to run or reattempt to run the Race to the Stones 100k ultramarathon, which goes from... Where does it go from? Hang on, let me just find the route. As you can tell, with it being only 3 weeks away, I am really well prepared. So I'm just going to quickly Google Race to the Stones. So I'm going to attempt Race to the Stones, which is a 100k ultra that goes from Lucknow. I hope I've pronounced that right. It's a small village near Oxford. It's not a million, just south of Oxford. It's not a million miles away from High Wycombe, in between Oxford and High Wycombe. Lucknow is a small village. I've actually done this event before. I did this event, when did I do it? It's one of my first videos on my channel, on my YouTube channel. And yeah, this event is a tough one. So it goes for Lucknow, and it goes to Avebury. It actually finishes at the Avebury Stone Circle, which is near, it's not a million miles away from Chippenham, it's towards Chippenham. But yeah, again, it goes through some very, very pretty surroundings. I'm going to talk a bit about it in a short while. But before I do, I want to talk about the London 55k Ultra. And the reason why I want to talk about it is because it is a real hidden gem within London. So I've mentioned already, when you think of ultramarathons, you don't think about running an ultramarathon or a trail marathon through central London, but it kind of is a trail marathon, and it's a really good one. I did it 2 days ago, and it starts in Woolwich, actually Woolwich Arsenal on the old docks. It's a very pretty part of southeast London. I mean, Woolwich itself isn't that pretty. I mean, Woolwich is a proper inner London town centre, but this starting line was on the Woolwich Arsenal docks, and as you can imagine, it's been gentrified and glamorized and made to look very nice. And yeah, it's a nice start line, and you immediately hit the Thames, and you run along the Thames for what, half a kilometre, and then immediately you then veer into the footpaths, the parks, and the trails, farmers fields. I don't think there's any farmers fields. But it's really strange because you veer off into these unknown, hidden alleyways and footpaths, like a warren, like a labyrinth of alleyways and footpaths is the only way I can describe it, of southeast London. Now, I was born and brought up in Bermondsey. I was actually born near London Bridge, and I lived until the age of 18, until I moved out to East London. I lived and worked and went to school in this area, so I know this area really well. However, I've never seen this part of London, because obviously as a kid you don't spend a lot of time running. Most people don't. The last thing you want to do as a child is run, unless you're massively into sports, and I wasn't at all. If you've watched my latest video on my YouTube channel, Weight Loss Transformation, you will understand, where I talk through my weight loss transformation, you will understand that I just was not into fitness at all. So as you can imagine, seeing these alleyways, these footpaths, these trails, it was like opening a new world. It was like seeing behind the veil. It's like watching a Sherlock Holmes dramatisation on the BBC, where they just pull the facade of London down and you see this cool, rich, vibrant underbelly of the back streets of London. That's how I can describe it, and that's how it felt. It very, very much, and I hope I'm really painting a picture here. Now, I will say, growing up in the 1980s, if you walked or ran these alleyways, you were taking your life into your own hands. But London's not like that anymore. I mean, I'm sure if you run some of these alleyways at 3 o'clock in the morning, it might be a different story. But London is very, very much it's a very safe city, and running through it along these trails, along these footpaths, along these alleyways was an amazing experience. So as I say, we started in Woolwich, we ran along the Thames for quite a while, and then we veered off, started going through some parks of Woolwich as it led up into Oxley's Woods. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever been to Oxley's Woods. I highly recommend a trip. If you live in or around London or you're on holiday, take a trip to Oxley's Woods. It's somewhere between Woolwich and Bexley Heath, and the woods itself are amazing. If I said to you that we were in the New Forest or we were in a different part of the country, you would believe me, because the trails is very hilly, which again, unlike London and unlike the south of England, we just don't have hills in this part of the country. So for it to be really hilly is a great experience. Being able to run up some hills, run down some hills, and run through woodland in London is phenomenal, and it is like something out of a Beatrix Potter novel. It's got that romanticised feel to it. So we got to run for quite a long time, because Oxley's Woods is quite big, it's quite vast. It will take you a while to explore all the nooks and crannies. So we got to do this trail running through woodland, through London. It was fantastic. So the route itself, let me talk a little bit about the London 55k ultra route. So the route starts in Woolwich, you run along the Thames, not very far, probably about half a k, and then you veer off and you go up through Charlton, through Oxley's Woods, and then you start coming around, kind of, you do like a semicircle direction around through some of the deepest, darkest parts of southeast London. I've mentioned this already, through New Eltham, Grove Park. This doesn't sound particularly sexy or exciting, but it really, really is. You know, you come up through Norwood, and then you start going across into southwest London, and this is where you hit, as you come through Wandsworth Common, you then hit Putney and ultimately Richmond Park, and you kind of end near Kew in I think it's a rugby club. But the jewel in the crown of this route is being able to run across Wimbledon Common and then Richmond Park, being able to see all the deer, especially when it's a nice day like it was on Saturday. And yeah, it was such a good event. And I wanted to talk about it because it's the first time I've done a serious run since January. I've done next to no running this year because I've been mainly focused on my cycling. I've massively got into Zwift, as you can probably tell from my YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this episode, then you probably have watched my YouTube channel. You'll probably hear from my YouTube channel. So you know how much I love Zwifting, and you know that I've just got into cycling. I very recently completed the London to Brighton bike ride. I'm in an iron about whether or not I should do an episode on a London to Brighton bike ride. Let me know in the comments if you want me to. I've not done a lot of running this year, like next to none. I've done a few cheeky 5k park runs. I've done a few fun runs. We recently went on holiday, just a weekend away, to Bridport on the south coast. And that was a fantastic trip for the family, just a family time away for a long weekend, 4 days away. And I did some running over the cliffs and I really enjoyed it. So whenever I see a new area, then I take an opportunity to go for a run. But I haven't done any trail training. I certainly, and I can't emphasize this enough, I certainly have not done any ultramarathon training. So to then bosh this out, the challenge was, the reason why I signed up to it originally fully intending to train for it. I've got Race to the Stones, the ultramarathon 100k distance. I've got that in less than 3 weeks. I've mentioned that already. And this was for me a training run. This was going to be kind of the calm before the storm, get half the distance kind of complete, even though it's 55k, so slightly more than half the distance. And it would really give me some confidence of psychologically going into Race to the Stones. However, the plan was not then just to spend 6 months cycling. So my last big run was in January, where I ran over the South Downs. I ran the Arundel Marathon at the end of Jan. So since then, I've done next to no running. So I had a little chat with Tracy and I had to think about this. And I thought, is this a good idea? Should I continue with competing or completing? I don't know why I say competing, because I'm not competing with anyone except myself. But should I be completing the London 55k Ultra? Or should I let it slide? Should I defer it to next year? I haven't done any training, so it is quite a risky thing to do. When you haven't trained for something of this magnitude, this isn't just going out and, boshing out a 10k or 20k. This is 55k. And most people, if you haven't run that distance, if you haven't covered that distance on foot, it's a very, very different experience to doing it in a car or on a bike or anything like that. Anyone that's done an ultramarathon will understand what I mean. That you just reach a point where if you haven't trained for it, you know it. You know you haven't trained. So I thought, do you know what? I'm going to go into it. I'm going to complete it. And I'm going to see if Zwift and cycling is enough training to get me through 55k. And it turns out it is. Or when I say it is, it kind of has, it's a bit of a yin and yang situation. It is and it isn't. So let me explain what I mean by that. So can I run 50? This is what my video is going to be this week, by the way, guys. So if you're listening to this podcast, this Friday's video is going to be my London to Brighton bike ride, and then next week's going to be, can I run 55k having only trained on Zwift? That's going to be my video. So you're going to be able to watch the experience of running from Woolwich to Richmond or Kew in southwest London, across all of this part of hidden London, which is awesome. Such an awesome course. So I decided to go into this run with the mindset, is Zwift enough training? Is 6 months of cycling pretty much every single day on Zwift, having only done London to Brighton and a ride from my house to Clacton, which was, I think, 65k I did. So I've got some miles under my belt on a bike in real life, but is that kind of training enough to get me through a 55k ultramarathon on foot? Am I able to run it? Now the answer is yes, I completed it. I'm going to give you a spoiler. You guys get the exclusive scoop before anybody else. I completed it in just over 8 hours. I think I did it in just under 8 hours because I didn't actually press stop immediately. But my watch said 8 hours and 1 minute. That's how long it took me. Now, when I did this event last year, and I did this event in the same time last year, I did it in 8 hours, I think 45 minutes. The video's on my channel. The actual name of the video, you can watch this now actually because it's live, it's there. It's called... Okay, so can I run 55k in a heat wave? Last year, it was one of the hottest days of the year. It's actually the second hottest day of the year. This is a funny story. So last year, when I ran the London 55k Ultra, it was ridiculous. It was something like 35, 36 degrees. Really, really hot. That's centigrade. Really, really hot. Really hot for this country. Really hot for the UK. And it was sweltering in London. But it wasn't just 35, 36 degrees heat. It was also beating down sunshine. The sun never went behind a cloud once. It was relentless. It was really tough. And it was actually the second hottest day of the year. And the hottest day of the year was when I ran the 100k Thames Path Ultra only a month or so later. So in the same year, last year, and it was like 42 degrees. It was so hot. So yeah, my 2 ultramarathon experiences last year were on the 2 hottest days of the year. I just thought I'd share that really quickly. But yeah, London Ultra, can I run 55k in a heat wave? That's the name of that video from last year. So if you wanted to go and watch that, I uploaded that about 11 months ago. And then I had another one, can I run 100k in a heat wave? And that's the Thames Path if you want to watch that one as well. So they will give you some good... I'll give you a better understanding of what it's like to run an ultramarathon or attempt to run an ultramarathon. In a heat wave, it kind of puts you at a massive disadvantage. So the good news was this year it wasn't a heat wave. I think we averaged about 23 degrees. So still quite warm. That's not, the ideal running temperature. I would like to be like 17, 18 degrees. I know a lot of runners like it cooler than that. That's perfect running temperature for me. Overcast, no sign of rain. You don't want any rain. And it to be about 17, 18 degrees. Perfect. So yeah, I completed it. However, I will say, and there's a big however, having only cycled, my legs and my feet especially weren't used to the impact that running has. So when you cycle, you have zero impact. You have zero, how can I put it? One thing that cycling has given me, it has given me fantastic cardio. My endurance has gone through the roof. I have the ability to just keep going, which I've always had an element of endurance, but nothing like what cycling has given me. And it's also made my legs so much stronger. My legs are like, unbelievably strong now compared to what they were before. And I'm talking about it in relation to myself. Everything's in perspective. It's all relative to my situation. Before, I had nothing. I had no leg strength at all. I started walking. I started running. Watch my weight loss transformation video on my YouTube channel. You'll understand what I mean. Yeah, so cycling has given me that endurance. I am like a beast now when it comes to covering long distance, but I'm not super fast, which is why I love running ultramarathons. People say, why don't you just go out and run a 20k? Why have you got to go and do a marathon? Why don't you just run a marathon even? Other people say to me, why don't you just enter into marathons? There's hundreds of marathons that happen every day. Why have you got to do an ultra? Why have you got to go one step too far? And I just think to myself, well, I like running. I like running a really long way. I'm not super fast, but I've got loads of endurance. Ultramarathons are made for me in that context. And one of the funny things from the London 55k 2 days ago was when I took off in my wave, I was the first wave to go because I was, not the fastest on the day. There was loads of elite runners, loads of elite trail runners. This was a runners event. The wave I was with, the people that were in that wave with me, they all shot off. And the really funny thing was that some of these people spend far too long in pit stops and checkpoints, longer than I spend. I literally blast through checkpoints because you can get sucked into them. And that's a big tip I give to anybody running or cycling an event. Don't spend long in a checkpoint. If you're interested in time and completing it in a time and you're aiming for a PB, like I was, you can just get sucked into them. As long as you've got food and water, as long as you've got sustenance and especially water, just make sure you've got enough water. With the exception of that, people were just hanging around having a chat. They were using the toilet. They were checking their GPS. They were updating Instagram. They were eating sweets. They were eating bananas. They were standing there to eat. And I'm just thinking, you're better off, even if you're not running, you're better off just walking and eating than standing in a checkpoint. So I blast through them. And that's where I caught up with a lot of people that overtook or sped off on the start line. And then the other thing is the second half. An ultramarathon is a race of two halves. The first half is like a marathon. The saying is, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. What an ultramarathon is, it's not a marathon, it's an ultramarathon. It's made exponentially harder by the fact that you are going a lot longer and your stamina will expire a lot quicker than it would do if you was running a 10 or 20k. People think they hit the wall in a marathon. They have no idea what the wall is until they've done marathon distance, then some. So it's a race of two halves. First half is just about focus on time, focus on cadence, focus on pace. Second half, all you want to do is reach the finish line. And loads of people that shot off that I recognised from my wave especially, or people that overtook me in the first half of the race because they were going a lot faster than me and I was just keeping myself in zone 2, maybe pushing a bit of zone 3 downhill. They were pushing zone 4, zone 5 probably. They were walking the second half. So I was overtaking them. I overtook loads of people in the second half where I would just had my slow, easy cadence, slow pace, but constant pace. And it was a good pace as well. And I could run like that all day. And when I got to the finish line, I actually felt really good. Really, really good. However, and there is a big however, and this comes back to my yin and yang thing with the cycling and the running, my legs and my feet weren't used to the impact that I would have had if I was training for it. So if I'd been training, my leg muscles, especially at the tops of my thighs and around my hips, they would have been stretched out, used to the training, used to my running, and they wouldn't have hurt so much. They really, really ached. So they were getting quite stiff. And I felt it yesterday. I feel good today. As I say, 2 days later, I feel really, really good. Most of the stiffness has completely gone. I'm walking completely normally. But yesterday they were a bit stiff. So when I was going up the stairs, coming down the stairs, I could feel it at the tops of my legs. As I say, I carried on as normal yesterday. Went to work, absolutely fine. However, tops of my legs felt a bit sore. But that wasn't the biggest problem. The biggest problem was my feet. My feet weren't used to it. So they'd become soft. So where last year I did loads of running, I'd built up some calluses on my feet, as you do when you use them. If you're on your feet all day, speak to any manual worker, someone who uses their hands all day, someone who's on their feet all day, someone who wears the same shoes every day, your feet build up a resistance to being on your feet all the time, and your hands, if you use them, if you're a carpenter, a bricklayer, your hands build up calluses. Same with your feet, because they need to have resistance to all the hard work you're doing. So when you're running a long way all the time, when you're training for a long run, your feet build up this resistance. So literally within the first 10k, my feet were like, yeah, we're really sore and screaming at me. So I had parts of my feet that just were rubbing because they're not used to it. And I was wearing trainers that I used to wear all the time. You know, I wear them all the time for my runs. These are really, really comfortable trail trainers. And then the other mistake I made was I shouldn't have worn trail trainers, even though it's advertised as a trail event. And it really is. The footpaths, some of the footpaths are phenomenal. They are trails, but there's a big portion where you're running on concrete, you're running on pavements because you're running down streets, because it is London, you know, even though that you're running through alleyways and trails, there are big portions where you're running on pavements. And I'm wearing trail trainers to run on pavements, which don't have as much impact protection as, you know, comfy road trainers would. So next time I do this, if there is a next time, I've done it twice now and I've smashed it the second time. I beat my PB. If I ever do it again, I'm going to wear comfy road trainers. I don't think you need, because it was so warm and so dry, the ground, there was no risk of slipping. There was no risk of, you know, anything that you needed trail trainers for. And it really, you know, it's a really hilly course, but the hills, strangely, were on the pavement. So where you was on the open streets of London, the hilliest part is through Crystal Palace. There's a hill in Crystal Palace. Oh my God. It was brutal. And I remember last year I belted up it because, you know, bravado and adrenaline. I saw the hill and I thought, right, I'm going to go for this because this will help me with my finish time. Yeah, it destroyed my legs. So I took it easy this year, and it was one of the many things I did that got me to the finish line in a really, really good time, a time I'm happy with. Of course, there are people finishing it a lot quicker than me, but 8 hours compared to 8 hours 45 last year, phenomenal. Really, really happy with that. I did fall over. So if you want to see that, my big fall, I had a big trip. I was running down a trail talking to camera, wasn't looking at my feet because I'm looking at camera, and my foot got stuck under a tree root, literally full on Superman. Now, luckily for me, I'm really good at falling. I am really good at falling, which is useful because I fall a lot. I trip a lot. I've got terrible balance. So yeah, for someone who runs and cycles a lot, it's probably not good to have bad balance, but it is my kryptonite. My balance is my kryptonite. It's the only thing that holds me back. I'd go a lot faster, especially downhill, because I'm like a rocket downhill. But my balance lets me down, so I have to control myself. But yeah, it was a really, really good event. I highly recommend, if you're into running, I highly recommend checking it out. The name of their website is, well, at the moment it's called Ultra London, but as I say, they're having a brand change. Next year it's going to be called Beyond London. I'm not sponsored by them in any way, shape or form, but I just thought I'd mention it because it is such a unique event, and it's one that I've completely fallen in love with. I love urban running. I love running through streets, villages, towns, but I also love trail running. I love trail running. I love running through woods. I love running through farmers' fields. I love running across footpaths, you know, where you're completely on your own. That's why I love the Yorkshire Three Peaks, because, you know, it's trail running dream. It's trail running heaven. However, this had both. This had my love for urban running and my love for trail running combined, and it had hills. And who doesn't love running up really, really steep hills? So yeah, if you fancy checking it out, have a look. So yeah, so that was the London 55k. I'm going to move on now because I want to talk about Race to the Stones. Now I mentioned this in my introduction. Race to the Stones, I've got Race to the Stones 100k ultramarathon that's pretty much from a village near Oxford that goes all the way to the Avebury Stone Circle, 100k along some of the south of England's most beautiful terrain. So the Race to the Stones is a route that goes mostly along the Ridgeway. Now the Ridgeway is a famous route in the south of England. It's not a million miles away from London. It's very, very close to London in proportion to the rest of the country. You wouldn't want to walk it, but yeah, it's close to London. But the Ridgeway is so pretty. If you haven't seen any pictures of the Ridgeway, I'd recommend Googling it. I know that I've got a few followers and subscribers that are from Germany, of all places. I don't know why Germany like my channel, but I've got a lot of German subscribers to my channel. But I also have quite a large proportion. I think the last time I looked, it was about 35% of my subscribers were from America. So for those of you that don't live in the UK and you're not actually 100% sure the locations that I'm talking about, the Ridgeway is an ancient trade route that used to connect. What did it connect? Let me just quickly Google. I'm talking as if I'm talking with confidence. The Ridgeway National Trail is a walking route in a surprisingly remote part of southern central England. Even the National Trust, I'm on the National Trust's website here, and even they describe this route as surprisingly remote because based on where it is in the country, as I said already, it's pretty much in between, Bath and Oxford is the only way I can really describe it. It's very, very close to Maidenhead, which isn't a million miles away from London. And you've got the North Wessex Downs National Park or National Landscape, I think it's described as. But this is where the Ridgeway is. And it is surprisingly remote for this part of the country. It is so pretty. It travels in a northeasterly direction for 87 miles. This is the total route of the Ridgeway. And it is the start of the World Heritage Site of Avebury, which is where the finish line is. As Britain's oldest road, the Ridgeway still follows the same route over the high ground used since prehistoric times by travellers, herdsmen and soldiers. So it starts just west of the River Thames. That's how close to London this route is. And it's Britain's oldest road. When you see it, if you Google it, and for anyone that's completed Race to the Stones, you know exactly what I mean. It is amazing. The actual route itself is a fantastic route. So when I completed Race to the Stones when did I do it? I'm just going to quickly check. So I completed Race to the Stones the first time in July of 2019. And the reason why I completed it is there's a bit of a backstory to this. I know I've pushed this video a few times. I made a video called Weight Loss Transformation last week. It uploaded on Friday last week. Have a watch of that video because it will go into a lot more detail around why I signed up to Race to the Stones. But the reason for it was I went through people call it a midlife crisis. My family called it a midlife crisis. I had an awakening. It's the only way I can describe it. I had an awakening. I woke up one day. I was 190 kg at the end of 2018 going into 2019. I was fed up with being obese. I was fed up with not being able to move properly. I was fed up with always being tired. I drank far too much. I talked about that in episode 1 and 2 of this podcast. I'm not going to go into that detail now. However, I needed something to give me a kick up the bum. I wanted to lose weight. I wanted to get fit, but I didn't know how to do it. But I did know one thing. I'm very, very good with targets. Part of my job, I worked in a very high-pressured, high-powered corporate environment. And in that environment, part of my job was to make sure that I encouraged other people to hit targets as well as myself. So if they hit target, I hit my target, I got my bonus, etc., etc. That's how my whole wage structure was worked out. So you needed to be good at hitting the company's targets that they expected of you. And I was very good at that. I was very, very good at achieving the sales targets. It's the only way I can describe it, really. I'm not going to go into detail because it's dead boring. I took that focus, I took that skill set, I took the ability to make something from nothing, and I focused it wholeheartedly. I even quit my job over this. I focused that wholeheartedly on turning my life around, going from being a 190 kg obese bloke into something else. I wanted to transform myself, but I didn't know how to do it. But I did know that I needed a target to hit. So I signed up to the Race to the Stones in January of 2019, knowing it was going to be in July, a 100k ultramarathon. I convinced a mate of mine who worked with me at the time to do it with me. He was same as me, massively unfit. He wasn't as heavy as me, so he had that as an advantage. And we both signed up to this event. So then what proceeded was me pretty much walking every single day from January, mid-January, in the winter, just after Christmas, where you pretty much spend a whole month eating and drinking. So I walked every single day from mid-January all the way to July to try and get my body in a position where it was even slightly ready to walk 100k. Now, if I was being completely realistic, I knew I couldn't do this. I knew I couldn't do it, but I never let that happen. I never let that thought enter my mind. I never allowed myself to believe I couldn't do it. Even though there was a voice at the back of my head going, come on, Ryan, what are you doing? You know, you used to weigh 190 kg. And even though you're losing weight, and I was, and I actually think when I actually went into Race to the Stones, when I hit the start line, I think I weighed about 26 stone. So I'd already lost 4 stone at this point as I went into it. What's that in kgs? Hang on, let me just quickly check for our American friends. So 4 stone in kg is 25 kg. So I'd already lost about 25 kg going into the start line of this event. But I still weighed about 165 kg, which is about 26 stone. When I started Race to the Stone, the actual event, when I rocked up at the start line, that's how much I weighed. So it's a really, really tough event to complete when you weigh that much. Your body's just not capable of doing that kind of distance. So for that reason, for health and safety reasons, as I would probably describe it now, I never thought of it that way, but for that reason, both myself and my friend Paul, we decided to camp overnight, to do it in 2 days. So we would do 50k day 1 and then 50k day 2. That's how we would do it, and we would sleep in a tent in a field overnight. Now the event, I'm making it sound a lot simpler than it actually is. I mean, to be fair, that's exactly what happened. So I'm not simplifying it that much, but the event does organise this for you. So they put on the tent for you, they provide the campground, they've got all the food, they've got marquees, they've got toilets, showers, whatever you need, facilities to get your bag from the start line to the halfway point, so you haven't got to carry a change of clothes with you, everything you need. So it's not like an army SAS survival attempt. I haven't got to carry anything with me except what I need for the 50k walk day 1. Sleep overnight, your bag's dropped off at the halfway point, you've got all the food provided for you, sleep overnight in a tent, and then you've got your 50k walk day 2. Now, having completed it, obviously 4 years ago, I would say one of the hardest things to do was to sleep overnight on the floor. Rock hard, baked in the sun, farmer's field, with a tent, a one-man tent that I barely fit in, with no pillow and my own sleeping bag. It was horrific. I got about 4 hours sleep, if that. I mean, when I say 4 hours sleep, I mean I probably just dozed, fell in and out of consciousness. You've got to remember, I've just walked 50k at this point. So by the time we reached the halfway point, and there were other people that I knew were doing it, and they got there hours before I'd got there. So I was massively behind time, and I knew that my chances of finishing this event was exponentially reduced because of the time it had taken me to complete the first 50k. When we reached halfway, we were broken. I was broken. I had blisters on blisters. My body was just a wreck. All I wanted to do was go to sleep. So I had something to eat, forced myself to eat something because I knew I had to eat something. And then I got in the tent and went to sleep as best I could, but it was just horrific. It was the worst night's sleep I've ever had. We got up at the crack of dawn, forced myself to eat some breakfast, and then we went again for day 2. Now, if you watch my video, annoyingly, I've actually lost the original footage. I don't know how. I must have deleted it off my hard drive. But yeah, I'm really annoyed that I've lost my original Race to the Stones footage. All I've got left are these day 1 and day 2 videos. 2 videos, which are both half an hour long each, which is probably about 10% of the total, probably not even that, 5% of the total footage that I actually recorded. And I've only put the bits in where I'm smiling because I'm talking to camera. I didn't include any of the bits where I'm struggling because I needed at the time to feel like everything was okay. I don't know why. I had this in my head that I wanted people that were watching my videos to think that I was smashing it all the time and that I was this great fitness influencer. And I really wasn't. Which, if you watch my videos now, I put in there the good and the bad. I put in there the rough with the smooth, which I just didn't do in those days. So my videos are really, really short compared to the actual footage I've now lost, which I am upset about. However, it is a good indicator of what the event was like, and you can kind of get an idea of the route itself. But I'm returning this year. I'm returning this year because when I completed Race of the Stones in 2019, it took me 2 days, 2 full days to complete it. And yeah, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It is still the hardest thing I have ever done. I can't remember finishing. I nearly blacked out in the car on the way home. Again, if you watch the video, it really doesn't look like that. It looks like, I've Kipchoge winning the London Marathon. That's how I look. I look fresh. I look like I am ready to go again. But I really didn't feel it. And I can't remember finishing. I have no memory of crossing the finish line, seeing my children, seeing Tracy, getting in the car, driving home. I have no memory of that. I do remember it taking me nearly an hour to get from the car when we got home in the early hours of the morning, to get from the car into the house, up the stairs. It took me nearly an hour. My legs were in so much pain. I've never felt pain like it. My legs is completely seized up. I was cramping like I've never cramped before. They were done. My muscles were done. So to get in from the car into the house, and then once I got in the house, I made the mistake of lying on the living room floor. Once I'd got inside the house, I should have just gone straight up the stairs. I was covered in dirt because I'd been sitting down so much on the walk. Again, I never filmed this in the videos, but because I was sitting down so much across the 100k, did I have a shower at the halfway? I must have done. I must have had a shower. I think I did. Yes, I did. I had a shower in the morning. I was in such a bad way the night. I just got inside my sleep. By the way, I threw that sleeping bag away. I just got inside the sleeping bag, went straight to sleep. I passed out, woke up, passed out, woke up, passed out. That's how the night went. Woke up, had a shower, had something to eat, got changed, not in that order, and then attempted to complete day 2. When I got home, because I'd sat down so much on the dusty, gravelly, chalky, dirty trails between halfway and the finish line, I'd sat down so much I was covered. I looked like I'd been on a weekend with Bear Grylls, and I needed to have a bath. There's no way Tracy was going to let us get into bed looking like that and smelling like that. More importantly, I stunk, and I had to get in the bath. I couldn't get in the bath. I could not get in the bath. So I peeled off my socks. I think Tracy actually had to cut one of the socks off me because my feet hurt so much, and the agony of I was in so much pain. I made a huge mistake, which I've never repeated since. I'd watched a YouTube channel to say that the best way to avoid getting blisters was to use KT tape. So I covered both my feet in KT tape. I followed this YouTube channel, how to use KT tape on my feet and how to make it so as they don't peel off. Of course they peel off, it's KT tape. And I know people use KT tape instead of plasters to stave off blisters, but they just didn't work for me. So where they started fraying at the edges, peeling off, they created bumps and lumps inside my sock, inside my shoe, which were the equivalent of stones. They were balling in the corners. I had blisters on blisters. The complete underside of my right foot was one whole blister. I wish I took a picture of it now. One whole blister, probably larger than a baseball. That's how big the blister was. And obviously where I'd stopped walking on it, it had now completely filled up and made it almost impossible to take off the KT tape. Because I never filmed any of this, you guys, nobody got to see it when I uploaded the video. Again, the video looks like I've made it as a trailer for the event to entice people to do it. It's such a feel-good, it's an attempt at a feel-good couple of videos. That's how I've made it. It really doesn't show how much of an ordeal this event was. Nearly killed me. I don't remember finishing it. Blacked out in the car, or almost blacked out in the car. I was in a bad way. Eventually got in the bath. I think Tracy had to lower me like a carer, like I was an invalid. Lowered me into the bath, and I just laid there in absolute agony, washing myself, trying to get all this crap off me, all this dirt and grime and chalk and dust. Eventually got out the bath, couldn't get the KT tape off my feet. My feet were destroyed, absolutely destroyed. So what I did was, obviously, I put my, I want to say pyjamas, I don't wear pyjamas. I put my t-shirt and pants on to go to bed. I'm sharing too much now. This is the beauty of this podcast. You get an insight into my intimate sleeping habits. Really glamorous, a t-shirt and pants. But I left my feet hanging off the end of the bed. They hurt that much. Anyway, I wanted to share that because, that's an ordeal I've never ever wanted to replicate. And the reason why I run them straight through now is I can't sleep in a tent in a field. So I run ultramarathon straight through for that pure reason. The other reason I run them straight through is it's a challenge in itself, just to keep going. Because no matter how bad that night's sleep was, I wasn't on my feet anymore. So I did get to recover a little bit. There's no way I would have finished 100k if I hadn't stopped halfway to recover. There's no way I would have finished. I would have collapsed. I would have been taken away in a St. John's ambulance. So, that was a good decision. But I've decided this year when I return, I have done 100k straight through. I've done 100k straight through twice now. Once walking, which I call Walk the Line. It's one of my early videos, Walk the Line. And then the second time I did it was last year when I did the Thames Path Ultra. And I did that straight through. And that took me 21 hours, I want to say. So this year, Race to the Stones, I'm returning. I'm running it straight through. I am really looking forward to it. It's going to be one of the best things I'm going to do this year, if not ever. I'm not going to repeat any of the mistakes I made, so I'm not going to use KT tape on my feet, obviously. I'm going to make sure I've got the right trainers. I never had the right trainers in 2019. I bought these trail trainers, ASICs they were, ASIC trail trainers. They weighed a ton. They were like wearing lead coffins on my feet. I don't know why I thought they were a good idea. I must have fallen for the sales hype in the shop when I bought them. I'm going to return with my Ultra Lone Peak 7s, my trail trainers, love them, and I'm going to smash it. I'm going to run it straight all the way through. See if I can beat my time from 2019. That's not going to be hard. All I've got to do is just get to the finish line and I would have beaten my time. I could walk it backwards and I'd beat my time from 2019. So it's not about beating my time. It's about having a, how can I describe it? I want to have a glorious return to Race to the Stones. I want to return and achieve something which I set out to achieve in 2019. I'm never going to reach the dizzy heights of 2019. I'm never going to reach the feeling I got when I eventually recovered, I got from completing Race to the Stones in 2019. The reason why I say that isn't because I'm not expecting to complete it. Of course I'm expecting to complete it. The reason why I say that is because Race to the Stones was the first ever event I entered. It was the first medal I won, I achieved. It was an ultra marathon distance, so it was no small challenge. I hadn't run a park run at this point. I hadn't run a marathon, obviously. I still weigh too much. I couldn't run, so that's why I walked it. And I genuinely didn't know if I would finish it. Now, of course, I went into it because my superpower, I've said this before, my superpower is my over-realistic expectation of myself, my massively arrogant confidence in my own ability. I think it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you have this abundance of confidence which outweighs any knowledge you have of the ignorance that you're entering into these events with. Yeah, that's my superpower. So the fact that I entered into this event in the first place is because of that, and the fact that I completed it is because of that. So I don't regret having this mentality towards fitness, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have got this far, and I wouldn't be in a place now where I'd want to return to smash Race to the Stones. In 2019, Race to the Stones nearly destroyed me. I mean, it literally did destroy me. I mean, I can't remember finishing. I can't explain enough on this podcast how bad I felt, and I never, ever want to feel that bad again. The only way I can describe the pain I felt that night, and then the day after, and the day after that, and probably the day after that, because I remember it lasting for like 2 weeks. Like, it gradually got better every day, but it took a long time. The only way I can describe how painful it was like a 18th century naval ship where, you get hit with shrapnel from a cannonball, and they have to amputate your leg, and they've got no anaesthetic, and you've just got to grit down on a piece of bark. I am not exaggerating. That's how I felt. I felt like I was enduring the worst kind of uncomfortable, constant pain. And I stayed in bed the next day. I just laid there staring at the ceiling. I thought myself I was starving. I could eat for England. That was the other thing as well. I allowed myself to eat because obviously I burnt ridiculous amounts of calories. When I did the Thames Path last year in all that heat, I burnt just under 12,000 calories. 12,000 calories, right? And I weighed 116 kg then. 116. When I did Race to the Stones, I weighed 165 kg. I must have burnt nearly 20,000 calories across those 2 days, I reckon. Easily. 10,000 calories a day. I reckon I did. Moving that heavy frame over such a long distance. And I was carrying a massive DSLR camera as well, which made things even harder. I mean, I don't know why I didn't use a GoPro, because I wanted to get like Martin Scorsese level footage. And then the next day, because I'd burnt so many calories, I never thought of it this way, but I just ate everything. I ate everything in the house. I couldn't stop eating. I was constantly eating for like 2 days straight to replenish the calories that I'd burnt, to stop myself feeling rough. And eventually I did recover, but yeah, I was in a lot of pain. And then I remember not being able to get down the stairs, so I had to go down the stairs on my bum. And it took me, I think I was able to remove the KT tape 24 hours after finishing. Because obviously, if you don't know what KT tape is, it's like putting sellotape, material sellotape, on your feet that have now blistered, completely blistered. And as I was peeling this tape off, it was like taking skin with it. It was agonising. It was like a scene from Saw. That's the only way I can describe it. Horrendous. So I'm not going to repeat any of those mistakes. So this year, my plan is I'm not going to carry a DSLR camera. Easy fix. I'm taking a GoPro. I'm not going to put KT tape on my feet. I'm going to use chafing cream, which works quite well, or I'm going to use talcum powder. I use talcum powder on my feet because they keep my feet dry, and when your feet get wet, no matter how good you are as a runner, how much training you've done, if your feet get wet through sweat or water or puddles, that's where they start blistering, because water causes friction, and that's where they start blistering. So if you can keep your feet dry, then it removes the risk of blistering. However, The only downside to using talcum powder is you can't put plasters if you do start to form blisters, because the talcum powder plasters just don't stick to your feet anymore. So I'm umming and ahhing between going with lubricant in the form of chafing cream, which works quite well, and I did that for the London 55k 2 days ago, and I didn't get a single blister, or talcum powder. I used talcum powder at the Thames Path last year, and it worked brilliantly. However, the last 10k, because it was such a hot day, when the sun goes down, because obviously we're still going when the sun goes down, when the sun went down, obviously the mildew from the day causes mildew on the grass, and it causes a fine layer of moist water to appear on the grass. And the last 10k of the Thames Path is literally through farmers' fields, so it was like someone had just chucked. It was like we was walking in a bucket of water the whole way. It was like we was walking in puddles. The grass was just drenched, the earth was drenched, the paths were drenched, so our feet were soaking. I got to 90k with 0 blisters. 90k to 100k, my feet were covered in blisters because of the water. And the problem was, I could feel them forming. And the golden rule is, when you have a blister forming, stop to treat it. If you can feel a stone in your shoe, don't power through. Stop to treat it. Get the stone out, fix the blister, put a plaster on it, lubricate back up, put some more talc in, whatever you need to do, just fix the blister. That's what I learned. I didn't do that enough at Race of the Stones in 2019. I learnt that the hard way. Treat blisters as soon as you can start feeling the burn. Because as soon as they form, there's nothing you can do. Once they're formed, that's it. You've got a blister. You can't fix it then. You can put all the plasters in the world on it. That's not changing the fact you've got a blister. And it's just get exponentially worse then. And then you go from being focused on your pace, on your cadence, on your nutrition, to just the whole way then just thinking about this pain in your foot. That's all you can think about, the blister. I started this podcast by saying I haven't trained enough this year, run training. So Race of the Stones is going to be interesting. I did the London 55k all right. I did it all right. If I can do Race of the Stones as well as the London 55k I did 2 days ago, then I'll be on for a really, really good time. However, I learned the hard way from London Thames Path that I need to make sure I eat enough. Now, when I did the London Thames Path last year, I pretty much did the first 50k by not eating at any of the pit stops. I blasted through each pit stop and I didn't eat anything other than what I was carrying on me. So I had energy gels, but energy gels are great for just topping up your energy levels, keeping your stamina up, keeping your pace up. They're not great if you start to hit the wall, and that's what happened. So when I got to halfway, I felt absolutely horrendous, and I mean horrendous. I felt like I was going to black out. I thought my peripheral vision was starting to go. Again, hottest day of the year. We're in the 40-degree mark. So that was part of the problem. I was suffering with heat stroke. I drunk plenty of water. I was carrying at any one time, I was carrying 3 litres of water on me in the form of 2 bottles on my chest, on my running vest. And also I had a water bladder. There wasn't a risk of me being dehydrated because I was constantly drinking. And the thing was, I know that I wasn't dehydrated because I was able to still wee. So when I was at checkpoints, I was able to still have a wee, which is a good sign I'm not dehydrated. However, I didn't eat. So when I got to the halfway point, I was fatigued and I didn't have enough calories in me. Luckily, by the time I reached it, it was just in time for me to be able to sit down and eat a massive bowl of pasta. As soon as I'd finished that bowl of pasta, I felt like a new man. I felt like the Duracell bunny, you know, in the adverts where the Duracell bunny puts a Duracell battery in another bunny and you can just see it was like Popeye eating spinach. I went from this completely destroyed, ultra runner wannabe who was just flaked out in this deck chair in the sun to this ready to go, hard hitting, powerful. I'm exaggerating it a little bit here. I was at 50k, so I'm hardly fresh, but yeah, I was ready to go after I'd eaten that bowl of pasta. So it really shows how much of a difference nutrition, sustenance, having the energy to complete these events makes, and getting my nutrition and sustenance correct. The way in which I do that for these events is I eat loads and loads on the morning, but I don't eat things that are new. I always stick to my training food. So I eat loads of carbs. I have a carb gel, which I'll use in the morning. It's about 90 grams of carbs in it, which is loads. I'll eat croissants. I'll eat bread. Just things that are just starchy, fatty, and have loads of carbs in them that just give your body loads of energy. But they're also things that don't risk having the squits. Getting the 2 bob bits, as my nan would say. So anything that risks that, then I stay clear of. So for about 3 or 4 days before the event, I stop all spice. So I don't eat anything spicy, no chilies, no curries, which is my favourite. I love a curry. I love chilies. I'm removing any risk and I don't start on any new food. I also have a meal replacement drink, which I take, which I will then consume before I leave the house, and then I'll have another meal replacement drink just before I start the race. And I use them on long runs. They're a bit of a risk because if your body's not used to them, they can upset your stomach. The last thing you want to be doing when you're running along in an ultra marathon is to need to do a number 2. And then as I go through the event, I make sure that I carry with me things that have higher carbs in them, but also high in calories. So things like Soreen bars. I mean, they're small things that just sit inside my jacket. I think they're like malt loaf, are they? I'm not sure. Soreen bars, but they're high in calories. They're like 150 calories a pop. So if I do 3 or 4 of them before each checkpoint, before halfway, that kind of tops me up. And then by the time I reach halfway, I'm able to eat my full pasta meal with some bread, and it kind of reinvigorates me. And if I keep eating something at each of the checkpoints, it gets me through. You've got to remember, I still weigh about 95 kgs. I don't know what I'll weigh when I go into it because it's still, 11, 12 days off. I don't plan on losing any more weight, really. I'm not on a diet. I can't be because I've got the fan dance next week, which is a 24k, 45-pound Bergen route march over Penny Fan. So I can't be on a diet. I need to be eating food that keeps my energy up for that. And then I've got the Race to the Stones the week after. So when I go into it, so to move 95 kgs over 100k at pace, I need to make sure I get my energy levels right, and I need to make sure I eat plenty of food. You literally cannot eat enough on these events. The only thing you can go wrong when it comes to food is eating something that upsets your stomach, but you literally, from an energy perspective, you literally can't eat enough. So that's literally Race to the Stones. That's what I'm going to be doing in 11 days. I'm going to film it. I really hope you guys stick around to watch that on my YouTube channel. I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it. It'll be a great event. I'm really, really looking forward to it. I am absolutely hyped. I'm so hyped for Race to the Stones that I've decided to do a whole podcast episode on it. Race to the Stones holds a really, really dear place in my heart. It was the first event that got me into running. When I entered into Race to the Stones, I saw it as a Glastonbury style walking event. So, it was Glastonbury for walkers. People would turn up at it was a walking festival. That's how I saw it. People turned up for a long old walk and it would be a good laugh. It really wasn't like that. Obviously, the people I was with when I was walking were walkers because I was walking, but there was loads of people that ran it. And I thought, oh my God, you can actually run this event. And that kind of really inspired me to want to be like that, to be able to do that. It blew my mind that the human body could cover 100k at pace. So I'm going to return to Race to the Stones. So look, guys, that's the end of this episode. That's my Race to the Stones episode complete. I hope you enjoyed my kind of mind dump of thought process when it comes to Race to the Stones. I hope it came across how much I love this event. It holds a very dear place in my heart. I've mentioned that already. It's a phenomenal event. The organisers, the actual name of the organiser is Threshold Events, I think they're called. It was one of the best organised events I've ever been on. Now, I've done quite a few ultra marathons now, and I've been to loads and loads of marathons, loads and loads of 10Ks, 20Ks, and this event was one of the best organised. I think it's up there with London Thames Path. London Thames Path was phenomenal. So was Race to the Stones. So if you ever want to get into running and you want to try something, now of course these events you don't need to do 100k, you can do a half, so you can do the 50k. I think they also do 10ks and 25ks and marathon distance, so you don't need to do the whole thing. If you want to try I suppose it's a trail marathon, you could also call it. If you want to try a walking event, Glastonbury for walkers, if you want to try something like that, then I 100% recommend Race to the Stones. I've never really understood, when I go into these events, there's two things I've never understood, hikers and runners. Runners do it as well, but it's mainly hikers. I've never really understood two things that they carry. The first one is a huge backpack. I've seen loads of people enter into these events, either doing it half, 50k, 100k, and runners as well do this, carrying a huge backpack. I've never got that wobbles all over the place. So they come running past me, or I go running past them, towards the end especially, because I kind of catch up with people, and they've got this backpack on, and I'm just thinking that must weigh a ton, and it's just weighing you down, and you don't even realise it. So anyway, I've never got that. I don't care what they're carrying in it, unless it's medical supplies, because, they're trying to overcome a really hard challenge of their own. I get that. And then the other thing, and this is the best one, I've said this before, the other thing I just don't get, and hikers, like, please explain this to me. If you're a hiker, please jump in my comments and explain this to me. Walking boots. why on earth, especially the ones that go up above your ankles, they're like lead coffins. It looks like Frankenstein stomping along behind me. I watch these hikers with their walking poles and their massive backpacks and their huge walking boots. They must weigh a ton. They must weigh you down. They must be so uncomfortable. They must be so heavy on your feet. You've got to lift your legs up to move yourself, to move your frame, to move your body over whatever distance you're covering, 50k, 100k. Like, loads of hikers walk it straight through, which I've got so much admiration for, so much respect. Like, free your feet. Get yourself a decent pair of trail trainers. That's the only bit of advice I would give to anybody doing these events. Like, you're not climbing Everest. You are not climbing. You're not in the SAS. Like, I get why the army need boots. They need protection because they're moving at pace. And I know the argument. I've heard the argument a million times. It protects your ankles. It helps you with like risk of straining and spraining an ankle over a rock or climbing over a tree stump. But that risk must be absolutely mitigated by the sheer level of hell you go through having to move those massive plates of meat over such a long distance. Like, I just don't get it. Free them up. Get yourself a decent pair of trail trainers. But look after your feet at these events and your feet look after you. But that's the end of this episode. I went on a rant about trail trainers and walking boots versus trail trainers. I've got to wear a pair for the fan dance because it's part of the mandatory kit list. I'm not allowed to wear trail trainers, which, I haven't even bought them yet. I've got 11 days. So yeah, my feet are going to get destroyed for that anyway. But I've got Race to the Stones in 3 weeks and I'm really looking forward to it. I've tried to end this episode several times. That's how much I love Race to the Stones. That's how much I love talking about it. Thank you for listening to this episode. Next week's episode is going to be a sit down with my daughter. So my daughter Scarlett, who is 14, who's about to turn 15 this year, she completed the Yorkshire 3 Peaks with me a few weeks ago. And I asked her recently, she's been listening to my podcast and really enjoys it. So, big shout out to her, my youngest. And she's asked, or I've asked her, if she would like to sit on a podcast with me and talk through the Yorkshire 3 Peaks. And she said yes, which she never does. She doesn't say yes to anything. So I think she might have the fitness bug, guys. I think she might have caught it. I really hope so. She really enjoyed Yorkshire 3 Peaks. So I'm really looking forward to sitting down and listening to a 15-year-old talk to me, or 14, about to turn 15, talk to me about her aspect, about her insight into completing the Yorkshire 3 Peaks with me, her dad, a few weeks ago. So if that's something which you think you'll enjoy, it's going to be a laugh, guys. It's going to be an absolute blast. She is so funny, but she is like, it's going to be like me interviewing Kevin and Perry. That's what it's going to be like. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be a good one. I actually bought a new microphone for that episode. So please help me repay my investment by joining me next week, next Wednesday. These episodes go up every single Wednesday. And then I've got some exciting episodes coming up where I'm going to be doing some reviews of some of the events I'm going to have completed. And I'm also going to talk about some of the things I've got planned that I'm excited for. Cycling is going to become a big part of my YouTube channel because I have completely caught the cycling bug. London to Brighton I did 2 weeks ago now, and it was one of the best events I've ever done. And I've got some big events that I've got in the back of my mind that I'd like to complete. But this year I've still got the fan dance, I've got the Race to the Stones, and then I've got the Thames Path challenge, which is 100k along the Thames Path, which is as flat as a pancake. So it's a different style of ultra marathon. So I've got that in September. So it's a big year for me. I've already done the Yorkshire 3 Peaks with a 45-pound Bergen and my 14-year-old daughter. And I've also completed my London 55k secret hidden trails ultra marathon as well. So it's been a big year. I've already done a marathon in January as well. I mentioned that. So it's been a big year for me. Big year. And I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you guys as we progress. So thank you for listening to this podcast. Your support means a lot to me. See you in the next one. Cheers, guys.